You're listening to the TES Maths Podcast with Craig Barton.
Hello, and welcome to episode 1 of the TES Maths Podcast with me, Craig Barton. As well as taking me one step closer to my childhood dream of hosting the Radio 1 breakfast show, I also hope this podcast will be of value to maths teachers and maths enthusiasts wherever you may be. Each episode will be jam-packed full of features designed to highlight some of the top quality things going on at TES Maths. Things that have all been shared by the kind, generous and incredibly talented users of the TES website. All the links to the resources and ideas mentioned throughout this podcast will be available on our website. That's www.tes.co.uk/maths podcast. And there you'll also find a link to the forum discussion about this podcast. And if you want to get in touch, you can tweet me night or day at TES Maths. But better than that, each episode will also feature a special guest, and what a guest we have for you. Mark McCourt is a man whose CV is about as long as the new Ofsted framework and infinitely more interesting. His distinguished career includes being a classroom teacher, head of maths, founder of eMaths, director at the NCETM, Ofsted inspector, author, chairman of the Teacher Development Trust, and if that wasn't enough, he's now involved with the incredibly exciting Beluga Learning. And you may also know him as Tandy from the TES Maths Forum. Hello Mark, how are you?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you.
Thank you for joining us. And we'll be talking all of this and more with Mark throughout the episode. So let's kick things off with our very first feature. Well, the world of education is never quiet. In this feature, we take a look at some of the headline stories that affect maths education and how they are being covered in the magazine and discussed in that cauldron of lively debate, the TES Maths Forum. Well, Mark, one right up your street here, because rarely does a week go by without some mention of the dreaded Ofsted. So just in these last couple of weeks, I've seen a forum thread about teachers being worried about showing progress within 20 minutes in an Ofsted inspection. I've seen another forum post about a teacher who's worried that lessons will be deemed unsatisfactory if they register students at the start of the class and an inspector's in the room. And then there was a feature in the magazine about teachers leaving the profession because of the threat of Ofsted constantly over them. So as a former Ofsted inspector yourself, are teachers right to be so worried about Ofsted?
It's really interesting you introduced them as the dreaded Ofsted. I don't think I've ever found them that way myself, though obviously I'm slightly biased having been in both camps. But I would imagine that actually what's dreaded is the perception of Ofsted, right, and what people think about Ofsted. And I think their reputation doesn't really do them justice. Every Ofsted inspector I know is actually remarkably professional, cares about the profession, and is in the job for exactly the same reason we were in the classroom. They want things to be better for kids in classrooms. So I wouldn't quite class them as dreaded, but I do completely understand that feeling, that in the pit of your stomach when somebody's coming in to watch you and there's a judgment going to be made. Myths abound about Ofsted though, showing progress in 20 minutes. Interesting, we had a discussion about this just a few days ago, a few Ofsted inspectors. Can you show progress in 20 minutes? Well, yeah, you can actually. You could show progress in 5 minutes. You could show progress in the blink of an eye, that eureka moment where the kid just gets it and they understand what's going on. They've made progress. But that isn't what Ofsted are about. They're not about coming in and saying every child has to make progress in 20 minutes here. They're coming in really to calibrate the judgments your schools have already made about teachers. They're coming in to ensure children have got the best possible chance in life. We're really looking for, particularly in the new Ofsted framework, we're really looking for what's going on in terms of the learners. Interestingly, there's a move away from looking at teaching, but just looking at learners and learner outcomes. So if an Ofsted inspector can come into your room and discover the learning that's going on with those children, they'll walk out happy. And these common myths of 20 minutes and the like, they're sound bites and they're things that the press like to propagate and make people worry about. But what I'd suggest that people read the Ofsted framework. You're better equipped to cope with being assessed if you know what you're being assessed on. In the same way you do that with children. You tell them what you want them to know.
But do you think, like, I'd feel more comfortable as a maths teacher having someone like yourself, a maths specialist, come in to judge my lesson? I have slight concerns when it's a non-maths specialist who might not be able to identify the progress that I feel my students have made.
It's probably the most common question I'm asked.
Oh, try to be more original. So.
Do you get a different grade if
Yeah.
it's a specialist compared to a non-specialist? Do you get a different grade? So the official answer is no, you don't, because this is objective and it's based on a rubric of criteria, so the grade will be the same. Do you get a different grade? Yeah, you do. You certainly do. It's really, really difficult to discover learning, to identify when pieces of learning are going on. There are lots of objective things that you can spot in lessons quite easily about behaviour and about culture, but actually spotting learning is very difficult unless you fundamentally understand what mathematical learning is. Finding it is nigh on impossible.
But that's not fair then, is it, to have non-math specialists?
But again, that's why I'd say that what's really going on is they're just calibrating judgments already made.
Right.
So those people that do come into your classroom, they're not there to say, I'm a maths specialist, if they're not. They're not there to say, you know, I know about the mathematics learning that's going on here. They're there to say, look, there are a bunch of judgments the school's made, there are a bunch of decisions the school have made. Are these judgments fair? Is this in the ballpark of what's really going on at this school? And I think having anyone that's a critical friend in the room, someone you can have a professional conversation with, I'm always up for that. Always been happy to do that, regardless if they're an Ofsted inspector or a colleague or a kid. I think it's a perfectly okay thing to do.
Okay. And I'm almost reluctant to ask you this, but I'm going to go for it because it's been the most popular question via Twitter for you, is, and I'm squirming here, what makes an outstanding lesson? Does it have to have ICT involved? Does it have to have the mini whiteboards out? Does it have to have group work? Does it have to have a rich task? Is there anything you insist on having?
Absolutely not. There is nothing that's insisted. And any teacher that tells me, you know, there have to be objectives written on the board or a 3-part lesson, I would, you know, I'd quite happily clench my fist and bop them on the nose. It's complete and utter tosh. We're looking for learning. And how you achieve that's up to you. Every teacher has their own pedagogy. You're the only person that can build that pedagogy. But we are looking for learning, and learning has to happen. There are no silver bullets here. There is no best practice. There is no way of teaching a lesson that works for everyone. If there was, someone would write it down, sell it, and be the richest man in the world. The fact is that there's a range of effective practices which have got more chance of success, more chance of having positive student outcomes, but there is no particular one. So the only thing we're looking for is the learning that occurs, what's really happening to those children, what difference has it made them being in that lesson with you. And frankly, they don't get very long. In terms of mathematics, they get, 1,600 hours in their entire school career. Every one of those hours is really important.
Yeah.
So getting a lot out of them in that hour, I think it's okay for us to say that's a really important thing to do. How you do it needs to be down to you, down to your community, down to what you think is the ethos of your school, down to the children you're working with, as long as it's effective at getting positive student outcomes.
Okay. Now, I could talk to you all day about Ofsted, but I know we've got so many things more to talk about. Maybe we'll have an Ofsted special podcast later on in this series. One other thing that caught my eye that I wanted to get your take on is this forum post about whether you can teach mathematics through projects. And I'm going to quote here. It's a post by Ali23. And they say, "Hi, I'm in the process of rewriting my Year 7 schema work, avoiding all textbooks and through a variety of projects and activities. I've plundered Boland Maths and TES resources and reckon to have a year's worth of tasks." And Ali23 asks, is this a good idea to avoid all textbooks and just teach everything through projects? Now, it was no surprise to me that the floodgates opened with this one, and straight back, a mere 7 minutes later, was Lolo7129, who says, "I think the plan is straight out awful." Now, what's your view on this? Is it possible to teach maths through projects, or do they need the underlying skills first to be able to access those projects?
To me, it sounds like great fun. Sounds like it'd be a great laugh. You'll have fun with the kids, be a wonderful experience. What you work into is entirely up to you. I don't know why working with projects means not teaching the basic skills as well. Why on earth would that be the case? You can still have a mix of instruction and discovery and children being their own knowledge creators and you being a co-creator with them. It's really about how you mix it up. I think the most important thing is what's right for your school, what's right for you and your staff, what fits your pedagogies, what works with your children in your environment. And if this is what it is and you're all up for it, go for it. You know, another school can't say to you, no, what you should be doing is using textbooks and sitting in rows and drilling. If that works for them, super duper. But if it doesn't work for you, you do what feels right. Experiment with it, reflect on what you're doing, assess what's happening, change it. As long as it's a living, breathing document that you can keep adapting and making better and better, I'd say go for it. There's far too much prescription out there already, and I think the further away from prescription we can get, the better.
I agree. Sounds good. Okay, in Show and Tell, I invite the TES users to share ideas that they have used successfully when teaching a certain topic. This might be resources, ideas for tasks or activities, or ways of introducing or explaining key concepts. However big or small, I want to hear from you. And for this first episode, I've chosen my favourite topic of probability. I love how it is often counterintuitive, crops up in everyday life, and how it lends itself nicely to games and money-making schemes for the students. I tweeted for your ideas and I created a forum post, and as ever, the TES users have not let me down, inundating me with some amazing ideas that I'm going to share with you now. And just a little reminder, anything discussed here, there'll be a link to it on our website. So the first thing is, when I introduce probability to Year 7 students or any class that I haven't taught before, I always like to start with tossing a couple of coins, because I find that students come from primary and one thing they know for definite is that the chance of a coin landing on heads is the same as a chance of a coin landing on tails. So I'll pick a couple of students, maybe Anna and John, and I say, all right, Anna, we're going to toss 2 coins. Anna, you win if 2 heads comes up. John, you win if 2 tails comes up. And I win if I get 1 head and 1 tail. Everyone agree that's a fair game? Kids obediently nod their head, everyone's happy. We start tossing the coin and pretty soon it becomes apparent that I'm winning. And I like that moment where kids realise something funny's going on and they're desperate to know what's going on. And once they learn the secret to it, they then like using that on mums and dads and granny and granddads. And it's taking maths home, it's getting them engaged in it, and it's showing them that maths can empower them to kind of get the better over somebody. So that's why I'm a big fan of probability. And Colin Lynch on our forums, he followed this up with something similar. He plays the 50p game, where he gets everybody to stand up in the class and he tosses a coin and they've got to say whether it comes down on heads or tails. If they get it right, they stay up. If they get it wrong, they sit down. And he says to them beforehand, if you get it right 8 times, you get to keep my 50p. The kids think they're going to absolutely clean up money-wise, but it was no surprise to us as maths teachers that pretty soon there's hardly any kids standing up towards the end. And then the kids have to try and figure out why that's the case. And that's, again, what I like about probability, the fact that it creates these kind of magic moments for students and that they are capable of figuring out why, and they want to figure out why because they've experienced it. Now, Mark, probability, was that a topic that you were a fan of teaching?
Do you know what, Craig? I hate probability.
Oh, no. Let's end the podcast there then, please.
and statistics in general, actually. I'm probably going to be lynched by the RSS now, and I don't mean to offend anyone, obviously, but I'm a pure mathematician. Pure maths is my love. I think the important thing, though, is as a teacher, you're an actor, aren't you?
Yeah.
So the important thing is that they think you love it,
sure,
so that they can feel the love of it. And
but what don't you like about it?
what I don't like about it is guessing. You see, it's not accurate. It doesn't play to my Asperger's extreme of the pure beauty of mathematics.
But it gives you a more educated guesses, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, perhaps. But you know, the wonderful thing about mathematics, it's such an enormous art. There are so many diverse parts of it that we can all love different bits of it. But that doesn't mean we hate the subject as a total. You know, I love doing mechanics. I don't particularly enjoy doing statistics. That's fine. And there will be people who love statistics and don't particularly enjoy mechanics and the like. But like I say, the important part is that the kids feel from you that you love it. The kids feel from you that this is something exciting. And just as you're talking about your problem there, that moment of getting them, that moment where they have that squint in their eyes and thinking, hang on a second, something isn't right here. And I really like the Monty Hall problem, or 3 prisoners, or whatever you want to call it. It has so many names. But I love that because I can do that with year 5s, year 6s, and I can do it with undergraduates, and I still get that same squint in the eye of, hang on a minute, this can't be right. And that gives you a really nice discussion about probability and getting into that topic.
Okay, well, I'm going to try and change your mind here, Mark, because I'm a big probability and statistics fan. And I came across this little pot of gold, and it's on the Relatively Prime podcast, which I'd strongly recommend you download. It's absolutely fantastic podcast. Now, Mark, have you ever come across the concept of the micromort? Micromort.
No, tell me about it.
All right, so this is a unit of risk that measures a 1 in a million probability of you dying. All right, so a bit puts you on a bit of a downer, but let's keep going anyway. Now, 50 people in the UK have a sudden death each day. Okay, so whether that's hit by a bus or a tree falls on their head or whatever. Now, if there is between 50 and 60 million people in the UK, that means on average, and we're making a few assumptions here, but the average person has a 1 in a million chance of dying suddenly. So we walk around each day with a 1 micromort chance of dying. Okay, now once we have that unit established, this micromort, it allows us to compare the risks of different events in our lives. Okay, so other things that contribute to the tune of 1 micromort are driving for 250 miles, walking for 20 miles, but just 6 miles on a motorbike. They each add another 1 micromort to your chance of dropping dead. So does spending 1 hour in a coal mine, and also, and my girlfriend won't be happy about this, drinking 0.5 litres of wine also adds another micromort to it. Okay? But now we're going to play a game, because once we've got this micromort established, we can compare other events. So I'll give you an event, and I'd like you to tell me how many micromorts it represents. Okay? So what about every time you go hang gliding? So walking around in your day-to-day life is 1 micromort. Each time you go on a hang glider, what do you reckon?
I would imagine it'd be really, really small, so a fraction of a micromort.
Oh, so less than 1 micromort?
Yeah, I would imagine so.
8 micromorts.
8?
Yep, so all you extreme sports out there, hang gliding, 8 micromorts.
Yeah, that's only because we're looking at small sample sizes though, isn't it? So.
Well, quite possibly. Likewise, scuba diving is 5 micromorts per dive, so not too bad there. But what about this? Say you go into hospital, and before you've been operated on or anything like that, you just have a local anaesthetic. I
would imagine that's quite high. Yeah, I know lots of people that don't want to go anywhere near hospital because they never come out. Sorry to the NHS there. Several micromorts.
But 5 micromorts there every time you have anaesthetic. Now, these are my 2 favourite ones.
I really should be dead.
Well, what about this one? Giving birth in the UK. Every time a woman gives birth, how many micromorts there?
Oh, giving birth. Maybe 1?
This surprised me as well. 80. 80 micromorts in the UK. More in the US, and once you get into some of the African countries, it's in the thousands of micromorts there. And then this was my favourite one as well. If you were a bomber in the UK Air Force in World War II, 1 micromort per second that you were in the plane, it added to it. And things like that I like, because even Mark, as a self-confessed non-fan of statistics, seemed reasonably engaged in that game. And what I like about it is I do that with my students, and they go home and they tell their mums, they tell their dads about that, and they're talking about maths and they're talking about statistics, and you can do what Mark did there and question the sample sizes and where it came from. And that's what we should be kind of encouraging our learners to do, to question things and to discuss things and to take them further. So that's why I'm a fan of statistics. And I'd strongly advise you to look up the micromort. There's loads of research been done on that. And also the micro life, which is things that reduce your life expectancy, not just kill you. So that's one of my favourite things to look at with that one. And that is show and tell probability. When I got the green light for this podcast, there was one person who immediately sprang to mind for my first guest. Unfortunately, TES had already had the funds on a web chat, so I asked Mark McCourt instead. Through eMaths and his work at the NCETM, Mark was a massive influence on my early teaching career. And more recently, I have found his writing and talking both thought-provoking and entertaining. So Mark, as we found out from my introduction to this podcast, you have had a ridiculously large number of jobs in maths education. So can you tell us, where did it all begin?
Well, the beginning in terms of education was kind of a mistake. I became a teacher by mistake. I was a mathematician, really interested in things like gas compression systems and mathematical modelling, that
Nice.
sort of thing. And a friend of mine had become a deputy head teacher at the school, and he asked me one day if I wouldn't mind going in and speaking to his A-level maths class about what mathematicians do, which I didn't particularly want to do because as a mathematician I have no discernible personality whatsoever and zero social skills. So the idea of going in and talking to 30 young people terrified me. But I did do it. I went in, visited his class and drove away and knew I had to be a teacher. Just knew that I had to do that with the rest of my life had to be about education.
What was it about the afternoon that you knew you had to be a teacher?
There was, I'm sure teachers have all seen this, there was a look in their eyes when I was talking about mathematics, when I was showing them real sort of mathematical problems. I was very lucky to be able to show them real things that I was working on at the time. There was a feeling inside me as well of sort of being in awe at these children just wanting knowledge, thirst for knowledge. And it just gripped me, really.
Jeez. So, well, the way you're talking there, surely you must miss teaching quite a bit.
Yeah, I miss teaching desperately, and everyone who knows me knows that I miss teaching desperately. But, you know, one has to move on and do other things with one's life.
And did you, because I find this a lot from some of the schools I've worked in, that teachers who become heads of department don't enjoy the heads of department role as much as they enjoy the teaching role. Did you find that, or did you equally enjoy being head of department?
Yeah, I loved being head of department. I loved being a senior leader and various other roles in schools. And you know, I know that some people find that being removed from the classroom takes away a part of what they love, and in some respects it does. But I always felt that, you know, I was an okay teacher. I was an advanced skills teacher, one of the first to become a maths advanced skills teacher. And I always felt I had a moral obligation, really, that I got to influence 200 children a year. It wasn't enough. And when you're a head of maths in a secondary school, you might be influencing 1,000 or 1,500. And when you're head teacher, more than that. And that's also why I ended up at the National Centre as well. It was this moral obligation feeling that I really need to make a difference on the system as a whole. And that's what took me away from the classroom. And even though I missed that, I've been able to see the fruits of what we've done at places like the National Centre and other projects I've worked on. And I'm very happy to have been able to do that.
Well, whilst we're on that then, the National Centre, the NCETM, if I can say it correctly, could you just explain to people what it is and what its role is?
Well, the National Centre is kind of the glue in terms of professional development for mathematics teachers. Particularly now that the landscape of professional development has changed a great deal. The local authorities have divested their intelligence, and there's this ground-up approach to professional development. There really does need to be a coordinating body, and NCETM can be that voice and can be the voice for professionalism, be the voice for excellence in teaching. It does that in a variety of ways. So it does that through very practical ways. There are resources on its portal which are amazingly good.
I agree.
Excellence in Maths Leadership, for example, is one of the finest pieces of professional development material I've ever seen. The department workshops,
They're fantastic.
Yeah, a great way of allowing a department to own their own professional development. So it has that practical approach to working with teachers, but also the ability through grants to enable teachers to work together, to be involved in collaborative practice or lesson study, that kind of teacher inquiry mode of thinking, and promoting that way of being and promoting that professionalism. NCETM came about from the Smith Report. There really was a need for a national body that would sing the praises of maths teachers. And it has done that now for many years, and I think very successfully. I think it's a jewel in the crown of the education system.
And is its future safe? Because I remember a couple of years ago it was looking a bit hairy at one point with funding and stuff. If
you're a department project, your future is never safe. There's no such thing. education ministers and secretaries of states are voted in, and they're expected to respond to the public who voted them in. And if the political will and the will of the voting public is to have this kind of approach, then it's safe, and if it isn't, then it goes. And that's very sad, but I don't think I'd want to see it any other way. I quite like democracy, actually. It's one of my favourite things. Of course, NCETM could make moves to become self-sustaining, and I think that would be a very positive thing for it to do, because I really do believe it should remain forever.
The other thing that a lot of people will know you from is eMaths. Now, can you just tell us a bit about why you set that up in the first place?
Yeah, eMaths is my labour of love. And it came about because I was at the East Midlands Advanced Skills Teacher Conference in Leicester in, I think, 2004. And there were lots of people there and lots of maths teachers there. And I kept hearing throughout the day people complaining about department spend on various things, including the hotel that we were in. And continually people were saying, why don't the department just put together all the best maths resources, the best maths schemes, and then give them to us? And that would actually really help. That would be a practical help. Anyway, I'm doing a speech at the end of this conference, and this gets asked as part of the panel discussion. Why don't you just do this? Or do you think this is a good idea? And I say, yes, I do think it's a good idea. And the person in the audience says, then you should do it. So I'm afraid it was one of those moments of driving home and thinking, oh gosh, what am I going to do now? I've said I think it's a good idea. I really should go and do it. So I went home and started programming eMaths and creating it. And that was launched in March 2004, has been around ever since, and is now its 2 to 3 million hits per month beast that it has become.
Excellent. Now, what's this? The Teacher Development Trust, another thing you're involved in. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the Teacher Development Trust, of which I'm the chairman, came about last summer. We were very aware that the TDA was going to become an executive agency at the department, and therefore would lose some of its remit. The TA still exists and is doing a really good job, but it would lose some of its remit. And there were some of us at the time who felt that this really shouldn't be something that happened, that the role of stimulating demand for professional development, the role of promoting effective practices, the role of quality assuring professional development is a really important one. So working with the TDA and colleagues at the department, we started to put together plans for the Teacher Development Trust. And the reason that we did this was that through being a trust and through being independent, it won't fall prey to the thing we were talking about a moment ago with the National Centre. It won't be at the whim of new governments. The TDT can exist forever. So the TDT officially launched in March with a launch event at the department, and is now gearing up ready for a national series of teacher inquiry networks where we hope to get hub schools and groups of schools working together on collaborative professional development. The TDT also runs the national CPD database. So that was with the TDA, and we now operate that. So if you're looking for professional development, goodcpdguide.com. You can head off to there and find all the courses and professional development opportunities that you could shake a stick at. So yeah, I think it's a really positive addition to the education arena, and the Chief Executive, David Weston, is doing a smashing job. Our board of trustees have got the great and the good of education on there, so I think it's there for the long haul as well.
Okay, well, that sounds very exciting. That's excellent to know. And on top of all that, you found time to start this little project up that's known as Beluga Learning.
Yeah, Beluga Learning is an approach to mathematics. It's going to be available on iPad to begin with, and then all platforms and all devices eventually. It's the brainchild of a friend of ours, Alistair, who came up with this feeling that there had to be a different way of independent learning for mathematics. And from that kernel, that thought that he had, a group of really good people have got together and created Beluga Learning, which is a world of mathematics. It quite literally is a world. So there are seas and oceans, and there are little islands and places to visit. It's very gamified, which covers the whole of the mathematics curriculum from numerosity, so understanding the concept of number and size and cardinality and the like, all the way up to lower calculus. And we've more or less ignored national curricula to create an international curricula. Right. Mathematics is mathematics is mathematics. So we've been able to simply look at the journey from that very first understanding of number and logic up to calculus and disaggregate that into a very granular form, so that students can decide which parts of mathematics they want to engage with. What was really challenging with Beluga was we wanted to create an independent learning system. And a lot of people think they've done this, and nobody has done this. I can say that with confidence. One of the things I spent an inordinate amount of time doing was looking at every app that existed that claimed to have something to do with maths education. And at the time, there were about 1,400 or so, or 1,600. There are fewer now. People have fallen by the wayside. And to a T, they were not good. They were practice apps, and there's definitely room for practice and consolidation, but they were practice apps, and none of them were learning apps. None of them were an environment that a child could pick up and, not knowing anything about mathematics, be able to learn mathematics. And that's what we wanted to achieve with Beluga. That's what we think we have achieved, which presented a real problem, because in terms of learning mathematics, I'm very much a constructivist kind of chap. And I very much believe that the co-construct between a child and a teacher is very important. Yeah. But if you don't have that teacher there, if you don't have that co-constructor, how can the child construct knowledge? How can they build their own understanding? And what we've done is we've developed a set of physical tools that the learner plays with, interacts with, manipulates. And it's through these physical manipulations of tools that they discover and create knowledge of mathematical concepts.
So this is very much aimed at the learner and not necessarily a tool for the classroom. Would that be fair to say?
That was one of our other challenges as well, because we wanted it to work in all circumstances. We wanted it to be, a child that hasn't got access to a teacher. There are many children in the world that don't have access to teachers who could pick it up and roll with it. We wanted it to be something that could work with maybe some work-based learning scheme. An employer might use it with their employees. We also wanted a teacher to be able to embed it into their schemes of work. And we wanted it to work across all of these different situations. So a learner can pick it up and they can interact with it. But we've also developed learner, parent and teacher dashboards. So as a teacher, you can set up a class, put your kids in there. You get a dashboard that tells you about their learning and their misconceptions and the like, not whether or not they got questions right or wrong.
Right, okay.
So this is not a 8 out of 10 kind of thing. This is now look, Craig, here's one of your kids here, Johnny, and Johnny has misconceptions in this area here. And if you engage him with this piece of learning, this would move him on in this kind of way. So it's a learning analytics rather than a sort of data analysis of the child. So we do hope it can be used by any kind of group or individual.
And I know I sound biased because I've seen it, but it is just phenomenal. It looks great as well, and I think that's important too. You must have spent a bit of time thinking about the design of it, because if you're expecting just kids at home to pick it up and want to interact with it, has it got to look like a game? Was that important? It's got to be appealing to just kids at home who have got so many other distractions.
It isn't just about it looking like a game and being gamey for the sake of engagement, though that's really important to us. But gamification actually helps in terms of cognition, in terms of acquiring skills, in terms of memory. The gaming world have known this for a very long time. And one of the papers that I talk about a lot is by E.T.L. Draw, where he talks about the good, the bad and the ugly of technology-enhanced learning, things about control and challenge, just right challenge. That these are things that have been present in gaming for a long time, that actually help the learning process. So there is an aspect of it that it's about engagement. There's an aspect, a very big aspect of it, which is about safety. And that's something we feel very strongly about, that learning mathematics for a lot of people isn't a safe environment. You're sitting in a classroom, you want to answer a question, but if you put your answer up, you may be derided, you may be told off, you may be laughed at. You may have an experience at home where you're working with a parent, and now it's not the child who feels that way, but the parent feels exposed and they feel unsafe to talk mathematically as well. So we wanted the environment itself to be a very safe environment. You don't fail in Beluga. You progress through a set of tools, and Beluga, because it's an adaptive system, it will adapt to what you're doing. So if you're getting things wrong, it will create content and deliver different types of content to fill in the misconceptions that link to what you're getting wrong.
The bottom line is that certainly in the UK and in most countries, students are still going to be judged in traditional exams with pen and paper, faced by with just an exam paper sat in a hall. Is this going to help students be able to multiply out a pair of brackets or factorise an equation or add two fractions? Are there still the traditional elements in there that are going to support those kind of skills?
Do you know what? The kind of thing you're talking about, that sort of the entire maths curriculum being driven by what grade C mathematics says in assessment. Yeah. Not only is that a national disgrace, but but do you know what? Grade C mathematics is jolly easy. There really isn't much on grade C mathematics, and I know that offends a lot of people, and a lot of people will be jumping up and down wanting to kill me at the moment. But it really isn't. And the reason that 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds fail mathematics at GCSE isn't because they can't multiply out a set of brackets. They fail it because they haven't fundamentally understood the real bedrock of mathematics. There are certain aspects of mathematics, the communicating mathematically aspects of mathematics, that when they are in place and children can understand, how many of your children in secondary schools understand what multiplication is? What do they think it is? Do they just think it's repeated addition? So getting a real understanding of the mathematical process, the mathematical concept that's happening, embedded in children's minds, when they reach those exams and they meet those kind of questions, they think, yeah, this is easy, because they have a deeper understanding of what's going on. I think we set our aspirations too low. That grade C list of topics that appear there really aren't taxing at all. We have rearranged our mathematics curriculum into this set of tricks that people learn. And one of the things that Beluga wants to really get away from is learning a set of tricks and algorithms that you repeat. Why on earth no bus stop method for division when all you're doing is saying, what I do here is say how many 4s go into 7, carry a 3, move. What does carry 3 mean? It doesn't mean a single thing to anyone. And for a 15-year-old who's now had to remember 1,000 tricks and 1,000 algorithms, is it any wonder they're entirely confused when they sat in front of that paper? But give them an understanding of what division is. Then, faced with a question, they don't have to remember a trick. They can build the knowledge. They can say, I understand this situation, I understand the physical nature of this situation, and I will build a way of overcoming this problem. I think Beluga addresses that very much so. It's very much inspired by the likes of Catherine Stern's work in Children Discover Arithmetic. Lots of work around constructivism and about how children can build situations, mathematical situations in their mind to overcome problems.
Well, I'm sure the way I feel about this is the way that many teachers feel, is that we just can't wait for it to be released.
No pressure.
No pressure at all. And I'd just like to thank Mark for coming in and being our first podcast guest. It was an absolute pleasure to have you in here, Mark.
Thank you very much.
Well, we have reached the end of episode 1, but I couldn't possibly let you go without first setting you a podcast puzzle, which today comes courtesy of 7 Puzzle and his amazing 7 Puzzle blog. Please check it out. So here's your challenge. Get a pen and a paper handy. Can you make a total of 24 using each of the following numbers once and once only, and with add, subtract, times and divide available to you? Here are your 4 numbers: 3, 3, 8 and 8. And just to reiterate, you must use those numbers once and only once. So no doing anything dodgy like 3 times 8 and thinking you've cracked it. So there is your challenge. Make 24 using 3, 3, 8 and 8. Well, next month we will be joined by Enrich to talk problems, puzzles and rich tasks for students of all ages and abilities, so get your questions in for that one. Once again, I'd like to extend a massive thank you to Mark for joining us. And just a reminder that links and details to all of the items discussed are available on our website. That's www.tes.co.uk/Maths Podcast. And please join in the conversation on our dedicated forum discussion page and also by following me at TES Maths on Twitter. Thanks for listening, and I will see you next time.